What is going on, world? What's up, YouTube? It's Zero here. Today I'm bringing us a brand new episode of the 8 Below Show. Welcome everyone to 8 Below. Thanks for being here, guys, to the best gaming related show here on YouTube. And I'm super excited about our episode here today. We have a lot of stuff to talk about, so let's get into it. We've talked on the YouTube channel about Driver, and I wanted to talk about in our first topic of the day, guys, about Driver 6. Technically speaking, would be the next continuation of this series, and we haven't seen a continuation of this series in quite some time, so let's talk about it. Driver, guys, is a game that spans from all the way back to 1999. Had a number of games, though. We had the first Driver, of course, that came out in 1999, and then basically followed by Driver 2 and Driver 3, one coming out in 2000, the next coming out in 2004, and then we had Driver Parallel Lines, which was technically speaking the fourth game in the main entry of the series, and then Driver 76 was a portable game on the PlayStation Portable. And then, of course, you had Driver San Francisco, which was the fifth Driver game that was, that was created for the franchise. And then the last couple of games, that being Driver Renegade 3D and Driver Speedboat Paradise, were both games that essentially one came out on the Nintendo 3DS, and the last one was a free-to-play game on iOS and Android. So we haven't seen anything. Let's just say in the main series, we haven't seen anything, since essentially 2011, guys, as far as the main series is concerned in Driver. And then Driver in general, anything that concerns the Driver franchise, we haven't seen anything since 2014. So main series, it's been a really long time, and then just in general, it's been since 2014. So it's been quite a substantial period of time. Now, what we'll talk about here is where is Driver 6 at this point, because I think it kind of comes down to a few different things, guys. If you consider Driver San Francisco to be the last game in this franchise that kind of came out back in 2011, you could see the Metacritic reviews for it. Metacritic reviews were actually decent. I mean, they were average to favorable reviews. You're talking 80s, or, pretty much anywhere between your 60 to 80 range, and that's not bad at all. That's pretty good. Now, of course, it's not as good as, maybe earlier on in the series, but it's pretty good for what it is. I would say that Parallel Lines was actually your very, fair to average game in the main series, but San Francisco I thought was pretty good. Now, in an article that was written by Sean Farlow of Gazette Review, remember Driver for the PS1, that game was one of the most fun driving titles for the console. The first game of the Driver series made its debut for the PlayStation in 1999. The title was later released for Game Boy Color and PC. For those who have never heard or played it, the game follows a police detective named John Tanner. The first game is the best-selling of the series and gave us a preview of the future with the freedom to explore a city and its popular locations. The series got even better after the release of Driver 2, which was similar to the first one, but brought an interesting feature to gamers around the world. The game, of course, brought back John Tanner and added a new detective, Tobias Jones. And then the third installment was released for the PS2 and Xbox in 2004. This one added weapons and featured great locations once again, that being Miami, Nice, and Istanbul. The title was later released for the Game Boy Advance and PC. Now, here's my number one thing, guys, about this franchise that I gotta say kind of bothered me. That was the fact of the matter that they were adding these games to like the Game Boy Color and to Nintendo 3DS and adding titles like that. It just didn't make a lot of sense to me personally. I thought that they should have just kind of continued to make additions or continuations of the main franchise instead of kind of trying to add little things here and there. It's always fine to add mobile games and add, things of that nature, but you should be consistently adding continuations of the main franchise over time as well. And so it kind of felt like they were kind of dipping their toes in too many different areas, and so they weren't like a master of one thing. They were kind of trying to be, a craftsman in multiple different areas, and it just didn't seem to work out. But that was kind of like one of the first things that I feel has resulted in us not getting a Driver 6 at this point. The fourth game in the series, Driver Parallel Lines, was released 2 years later and focused more on driving. The story did not follow John Tanner this time, and all of the game's story takes place in New York City. Critics liked the game more than the previous release and gave it better reviews, but it did not sell well. So number 2, guys, This one, that being Parallel Lines, at the end of the day, didn't sell well. And what it really comes down to, guys, is these studios are thinking to themselves, it really all comes down to money. That's what it is. It's a business, right? So at the end of the day, they probably looked at Parallel Lines and thought, look, I mean, we'll give this one last shot, see what happens. Maybe it'll do well, maybe it won't, but this didn't sell very well for us, so we need to kind of keep an eye on, how many more of these games we make. The series then made an appearance on the PSP with Driver 76. The game set in New York City was the first in the series to be published by Ubisoft after they acquired the studio. And then the fifth Driver game, Driver San Francisco, was the center of many rumors, but the title was finally confirmed at E3 2010 and released a year later. The game follows Tanner and removed the ability to get out of the car. Instead, a new feature called Shift was introduced. The feature gave players the option to change to any car at any time. Driver San Francisco received good reviews and sold well. 2 other games have been released since Driver San Francisco, that being Driver Renegade 3D and Driver Speedboat Paradise. Driver 3D is an exclusive for the Nintendo 3DS, and Driver Speedboat Paradise is a smartphone game available for iOS and Android. A new game for the console has not been confirmed, but fans of the series are waiting. The latest consoles have brought games with beautiful graphics, so a new Driver title would stand out if it featured new or even past locations. So here's the third thing, guys, that really, like, the third, I feel like the big 3 things that kind of just hurt this series, and this is why we haven't seen another Driver game. Number 3 is that in Driver San Francisco, even though it sold well, I feel like it really, the fact that you weren't able to get out of your car really kind of hurt the experience a lot in Driver San Francisco. I feel like, it kind of just took away a lot of that open world, that feeling of being able to just explore and such, just on foot or by driving. And so I think that was like that third thing that came up that really hurt this franchise in a substantial way. And that's part of the reason why we haven't seen a Driver 6 at this point. Now, as far as the film is concerned, guys, there have been talks of a film since 2002, but it wasn't until 2007 when Driver and its budget of $48 million almost got started on a movie. The studio was almost ready to start working on the film when a waterfront revitalization project made the studio move. The studio decided to put the film on hold, and nothing has been said about it since. Now, so as far as the film goes, I believe there was a Driver, or maybe it was called Drive, with Ryan Gosling that came out. And that was a pretty good movie. It was obviously not anything related to the Driver games, but nonetheless, guys, I think that, this was a series that was even looking to make a movie. So when you look at that, obviously they got something special. If you're planning on maybe doing a movie and you're, adding a decent amount of games here, this is a franchise that's spanned for, a good course of time. So my thoughts are that where's Driver 6 at this point? It has been on the back burner. It's been something that definitely could come out at some point or another, but I think it was really 3 big things, and even some people might argue that they weren't necessarily big things, but 3 things that really have kind of held Driver back in a way that hasn't helped it move forward and get continuations of the franchise. Now, I would love to see a Driver 6 come out on PS5, Xbox Series X, PC. I think that would be absolutely awesome. I think it would be great for the next-gen consoles to have Driver come back. This is a game that I definitely think should come back. It should coexist with other open-world games, of course, in the genre and in gaming in general. But I'd love to hear from you guys. Where do you guys think Driver 6 is at this point? I think it's in a limbo state. It's on the back burner right now, but I definitely think it's possible that this game does come back at some point or another. Let me know what you guys think in the comment section below. And for more Driver 6 content and videos, stay here with Zero TV. There was an announcement a while back that there was going to be a Splinter Cell movie, and I think the gaming community, at least, that loves Splinter Cell, and I'm one of those people, were absolutely curious about a Splinter Cell movie. But more than that, we've always wanted just more continuations of the Splinter Cell franchise in the form of video games, and we haven't seen one since, of course, Splinter Cell Blacklist. Well, in this segment of the show, guys, I want to talk about the Splinter Cell movie, where this movie is possibly at this point in time, because what really came out that was really exciting for most of us was that Tom Hardy was allegedly going to play as Sam Fisher in the Splinter Cell movie, which I think would be a really cool concept. So let's talk about it. In an article, guys, that was written by Paul Tassi of Forbes, Ubisoft finally managed to release their Assassin's Creed movie, but their Splinter Cell movie has been sitting in development hell for quite a while and now. That said, the project still exists, and Collider spoke with producer Basil Iwank about it, and things got a little weird. The strangest part comes when Iwank is asked about the difference between Assassin's Creed and Splinter Cell, and if the financials of the former will affect how the latter moves forward. They're separate kind of things. The story of the financial success of Assassin's Creed is yet to be told because we do live in an international world. It's still rolling out. Assassin's Creed had a very specific world to it and a very specific storyline, character, all that stuff. Splinter Cell really is a first-person shooter game, and so the challenge of making Splinter Cell interesting was we didn't have this IP with a very specific backstory. That allowed us to make up our own world and really augment and fill out the characters. I don't think one applies to the other because I don't think our movie will feel like a movie that came out of a video game. I think it'll feel like a badass Tom Hardy action movie, which is what we wanted. So obviously there were a number of things here that are very off about what he's stating here. Number one, guys, before I get back to the article, number one is that Assassin's Creed did not do well. Let's all be real about that. I mean, it was very much so, had a lot of potential to it, let's put it that way, but the way it was executed was so just not at all the way that I was hoping it was going to be portrayed as a movie. I really felt that there was something special in that movie, like it could have been a really special movie, but Michael Fassbender, I thought, he's a great actor and such. I just thought that the directing and the editing was so poor for that movie, where they seemed like they were obviously they were showing the animus and then they were showing things that were happening in that world and they were going back and forth and cutting to it. It always took you out of the action so much because of them showing you what was happening in the animus. All in all, it was just not a very good film experience. However, I think that Splinter Cell might do a little bit better, but when you look at what they're stating here, and really when I say they, I'm saying Iwank is saying, it kind of leads you to believe maybe they should just leave this alone. Don't make it a movie. Can you just please continue the video games? So a few things here. Splinter Cell is not a first-person shooter. Obviously, that was so weird. That's like the first red flag right there. It's like, dude, it's a third-person shooter, but it's more of a third-person, spy and very much so a stealth action game. Splinter Cell certainly does have a specific story attached to both it and Sam Fisher across its various installments. This very much seems like they just wanted to make a cool action movie with Tom Hardy and are content simply slapping the Splinter Cell Tom Clancy badge on the final product. He's talking about how this is different than Assassin's Creed, but in a weird way, that movie did almost the same thing. Yes, the Assassin's Creed movie had Assassins and Templar and the Animus and Abstergo, but it had no characters from the games, meaning pretty much everyone was invented from scratch using only the base framework of the series as inspiration. And one of the main problems with the film was that for some reason, it reversed the storytelling mechanic of the games. The movie spent almost all its time in the present day while only jumping to the past for 2 to 3 brief action sequences. 100% agree with that. Now, from the looks of the Splinter Cell comments, it seems like that movie is going to get even further away from the games to the point where it really doesn't even care about them at all. Yes, Tom Hardy's character will be named Sam Fisher, and there will be glowing night vision goggles, and he will probably drop down from the ceiling at one point, but everything else will just be turned into whatever action story they want to make. So, look, guys, all in all, I think that it's just a bad idea, in my opinion, for them to make a Splinter Cell movie. Now, where is the Splinter Cell movie? That's what the topic is right now, is where is this movie at this point? Because we could talk about it until we're blue in the face about how we don't think it's a good idea or we think it's a great idea. At the end of the day, let's look at some of the facts. If you go over to Tom Hardy's IMDb page, which, guys, Tom Hardy, an incredible actor, right? I mean, pretty much really felt like he got his first role that just was incredible, and his first breakthrough performance that got him that recognition throughout the world was really Inception in Christopher Nolan's film. But if we go down to his filmography, so he's supposed to be playing Sam Fisher in Splinter Cell, but when you look at his IMDb page, you're going to see that the stuff that he's working on right now is Venom 2, they're in post-production right now, Fonzo, which he's in post-production for, and then War Party, and then Mad Max The Wasteland, which are 2 movies that were announced. So what this is telling me is I'm not seeing anywhere on there anything about a Splinter Cell, unless they're naming it something completely different, unless like War Party is supposed to be the Splinter Cell, which obviously it's not. Mad Max, well, we all know Mad Max. And Fonzo, he plays Al Capone, so that's not going to be Splinter Cell. And Venom 2, well, we all know what Venom 2 is. So to me, what this tells me is that this is on an indefinite hiatus. It very well might actually have been canceled at some point. We just haven't heard anything about it. So unless they're not moving forward anymore with Tom Hardy, they're moving forward with a different actor or something, which we haven't heard of. This is something that is it's very interesting, and I think it's probably a good thing. Ubisoft probably saw just how poorly the reception and how poorly Assassin's Creed did at as far as from a marketing and a global box office standpoint. They probably just thought, you know what, maybe we should just hold off on making any more movies. Let's focus on the games. And I hope this means that we're going to be getting a Splinter Cell game in the near future. Does this mean, guys, that a Splinter Cell movie would be terrible? Absolutely not. I mean, a Splinter Cell movie might be good. I mean, it's possible, but we've seen so many times, countless times, where video games that are, made into movies, how they just don't really work. And Splinter Cell, after seeing kind of the preview, that being Assassin's Creed, I just think that a Splinter Cell movie might not do very well. Now, the best movie or video game made into a movie, in my opinion, I mean, guys, there's a very short list, but I would say, guys, in my opinion, when they made Warcraft, I thought that Warcraft was better than a lot of the other video game movies I had seen, even though I didn't think it was amazing. I thought it was okay, and a lot of people didn't like it, and there's some people who really liked it, but it seems like the video game that are turned into movies are just simply there's a real disconnect with a lot of the fan bases of the video games and people who are moviegoers. All in all, guys, I just don't think that, other than The Witcher, which is a series that they brought on Netflix, I think that's probably the best adaptation of a video game we've seen on the screens, as far as like from a streaming perspective, like a TV perspective, or even, a movie perspective. I feel that maybe doing like a series like that for Assassin's Creed, or a series like that for Splinter Cell, might be the way to go, because we've seen that success of The Witcher. When you do it in a movie format, it's just not that good, guys, for the most part. But at the end of the day, who knows if this is in a limbo state? I think it is at this point. The article was written in 2017. Tom Hardy's IMDb page is pretty much updated immediately when things are announced and such, and we're not seeing anything on here of a Splinter Cell movie. But let me know what you guys think. Would you want to see a Splinter Cell movie? Let me know in the comment section below. And for more Splinter Cell content and videos, stay here with Zero TV. Resident Evil 8 is going to probably be coming out here at some point or another in the foreseeable future. And I've talked about on the YouTube channel the things that we kind of know about the game and such. But one thing in particular that I really feel that we need to kind of eye in on is the multiplayer aspect of Resident Evil 8, and if this is something that we will maybe see in this game. So let's talk about it, guys. Resident Evil 8, guys, is supposedly, according to rumors and leaks and things of that nature, it's stated that Chris Redfield is going to be the primary character that this game is going to focus around. There's rumor that it's going to be a continuation of Resident Evil 7 Biohazard, which I wouldn't mind that either. As far as if Chris Redfield is going to be the playable character, that's another interesting thing, because at the very end of Resident Evil 7 Biohazard, spoilers for all of you who have not played the game at this point, seems to be Chris Redfield is kind of one of the last figures that you see at the end of Resident Evil 7. And so it looks to be that maybe Chris Redfield is going to be the guy moving forward here, if this is the direction they decide to go in. Now, what does this have to do with multiplayer? Well, look, guys, there's been in the past, I'll remember Resident Evil 5, I believe it was, when that came out, you're still playing kind of as Chris Redfield, and you have multiplayer elements. You had a full-blown story. You had, obviously, those games, guys, felt more of like action games. And see, Resident Evil 7, what I loved about Resident Evil 7 was that they got back to the roots, making it really eerie and unnerving experience, which is exactly what Biohazard was, in my personal opinion. A very unnerving experience. One of the scariest games I've ever played, guys. I thought it was a terrifying experience. And I've played a lot of horror games. If you guys know me from the YouTube channel, I love playing horror games. I love to watch horror movies, and I've got to say that that was an unnerving experience without a doubt, and I want to see a continuation of that in Resident Evil 8. Part of me feels, though, that if they move in the direction of, kind of following right after Resident Evil 7, I feel like it might not be quite as claustrophobic, as terrifying, especially if you're going to see kind of what's going on with the Umbrella Corporation and things of that nature. Now, obviously, they could take it a million different ways, right? But I think taking the helm as Chris Redfield once again would kind of implies that you would be moving in a direction of more action versus that of what you saw in Resident Evil 7 as far as horror is concerned. Now, obviously, horror action, there's nothing wrong with that, guys. You can see a lot of games out there. Dead Space, which is another terrifying experience. That game had a lot of action elements, obviously, as well as horror elements. So you could certainly do that in Resident Evil 8. But what does that lead you to with multiplayer? Well, if they're moving in this direction of action, you definitely could see more so of a multiplayer experience coming into the fold, similar to like with Resident Evil 5, like I was saying, which was one of my favorite experiences when it came to the Resident Evil series from an action perspective. It was probably my favorite one. And as far as from an action perspective, multiplayer perspective, and I would love to see that continue moving into Resident Evil 8, especially if you're going to take the helm or, take control of Chris Redfield once again. I obviously want those, horror elements to be in it. I'd love to see some of the creatures come back from Resident Evil 5. I would love, to see, some differences, some like familiar territory as well as some differences. So multiplayer, will there be multiplayer in Resident Evil 8? It really depends on the direction that they go, guys. If they go in the direction of Chris Redfield, more of an action-based kind of game, I highly would anticipate a multiplayer experience. If they decide to continue moving forward with the horror elements and kind of like, those claustrophobic moments and such, they might very well not decide to do a multiplayer experience there. Now, if Resident Evil 3, the remake, it kind of gives us a preview of what's maybe is to come, the multiplayer experience in Resident Evil 3 kind of reminds you somewhat of Dead by Daylight, and maybe they could go in that direction if they made Resident Evil 8 similar to that of Resident Evil 7. And I've always said this, guys, I always felt that having more content is better than having less content, and that being in a Resident Evil game, I believe that having a full package is the best part about it. Resident Evil 5 was the last game in the series that I actually purchased myself because it was a full package deal. I mean, you were getting a multiplayer experience, you were getting single-player experiences. Having co-op experiences and things of that nature also really help add value when you're paying $60 for a title. I rented the other two, of course, Resident Evil 6 and then, of course, Resident Evil 7. Even though I thought Resident Evil 7 was an incredible game, it doesn't justify paying $60 for just a single player story, at least in my opinion. You need to have more ways in which you can connect with that franchise. After that campaign's done, going and finding other ways and playing and connecting with the franchise in more ways than one is really, really important in my opinion. And so Resident Evil 8 would be smart to not only have, whether you want to take the reins of Chris Redfield once again and have a single-player story based around him, that's fine. I'd love to have some more horror elements. The other question is it first person or is it third person? We had that first person perspective in Resident Evil 7 and Resident Evil 5. Of course, you had that third person perspective. So you've got different perspectives here. And so a lot of everything rides on a couple of those big questions, guys, that we don't know as of yet. But if the rumor is true, that it is going to focus around Chris Redfield in Resident Evil 8, I would say we're going to get a third-person perspective. Once again, probably more of an action horror versus just a straight up horror game. And that would lead me to believe that a multiplayer experience has to be something that they've got to be thinking about over at Capcom. Why not making you got to make a multiplayer experience, in my opinion, for this game if you want to continue bringing people back. DLC and things of that nature, guys, is only going to bring people back for a period of time, like it did with Resident Evil 7, Biohazard, which I thought definitely could have really used something like what they did in Resident Evil 3, the remake, having a Dead by Daylight type of multiplayer experience, something that's just going to bring people back to the game. I think that, at the end of the day, is what you want. You want people to coming back to your game. We've talked about this with other Capcom titles like Devil May Cry. Bringing people back to a franchise so that they're not going onwards to other franchises, I think is just a really smart business decision. Even if it's a pretty cookie cutter multiplayer experience, people who love the franchise are going to continue playing it as long as it's supported and the developers are listening to what the fan base wants. But at the end of the day, guys, I do believe that Capcom would be smart to add a multiplayer experience, regardless of which way they decide to go. I think I might like to see Chris Redfield as the focus point in the next game, but I'd like it to be more of a horror experience versus that of an action experience. Maybe have a little bit more of a broad scope than what Resident Evil 7 was, which was basically just in one home. I'd like to have a little bit more of a broader scope, but at the same time, bigger is not always better. But I would love to have a conversation about it, guys. Let me know in the comment section below. Let me know what you guys think. Do you guys want to see a Resident Evil 8 based around Chris Redfield and it's like a third-person shooter, like an action meets horror? Or would you rather it be kind of like Resident Evil 7, where it's more of a intimate, very horror, based type of game? What direction you guys want them to go in? Let me know in the comment section below. And for more Resident Evil 8 content and videos, stay here with Zero TV. And with that being said, everyone, I hope you guys did enjoy this episode of the 8 Below Show. And if you guys did, leave a thumbs up, subscribe if you're new, stay positive, and as always, I'll talk to you guys all in the next one. Peace.